Steph Curry. I just talked to Steph Curry's agent, Jeff Austin of Octagon. They just agreed in principle with the Warriors on the richest contract in NBA history. 5 years, $201 million, and no player option after the 4th year. So Steph Curry commits to the full 5 years in Golden State, and he is now has crossed that threshold of the first $200 million a year player in the NBA.
Skip, 6 years, $228 million? I mean, when this contract is up, he'll be 33 years of age. Theoretically, he could go get another. I think we're going to look back, Skip, this is going to be a bargain. Because if Steph Curry right now is in the beginning and he's making, what, $40.2, $40.3, $43 million a year, think about in 4 or 5 years where that number is going to be. And by the time James Harden, who will be 33 at the end of this contract, Skip, somebody's going to be making $50 million a year.
I came across something that I never thought that I would on Twitter the other day, which is something that happens often on Twitter, but this is something that particularly shocked me. I saw this tweet asking which player was eligible for this Supermax contract that ended with the hypothetical player making $60 fucking million a year. $60 million at the age of 33. That is only slightly less money than LeBron James made in the entirety of his first stint in Cleveland, and that's more than Michael Jordan made up until his last season in Chicago. So what amazing player, what phenomenal all-time talent is eligible for this unbelievable contract? Who could it be? Well, let's scroll down to the comments section and see. This can't be right. He must have used the wrong GIF, because clearly it's not Rudy Gobert, right? That's insanity. Nope, this is actually true. Rudy fucking Gobert is eligible for a 5-year, $262 million contract. This is not a joke. I know I like to make jokes on this channel, but that shit was not a joke. Now you may be asking, not really, no one actually asks things out loud watching a YouTube video, but go with it. You may be asking, hey, Rusty, you filthy commie, is Rudy Gobert worth $60 million a year? No, of course not, you fucking moron. Well, would they actually give him that contract, you may ask? Probably, yeah. And that's the problem. That is the issue here. The fact that the Utah Jazz might actually be put into a situation where they are forced to make that signing. So let's talk about Supermax contracts and why they were, well, a bad idea.
Rebound. Save. Absolutely incredibly with the acrobatic alley-oop.
The Supermax contract was introduced to the NBA a couple of seasons ago. The Supermax, also known as the Designated Veteran Player Extension, is a type of contract that can go to certain players who fit the qualifications. The player must have played 7 or 8 seasons, and in order to qualify for one, you also need to make an All-NBA team or win an NBA award like Defensive Player of the Year or MVP. However, if you win Defensive Player of the Year or the MVP award, you probably made an All-NBA team. Not that it hasn't happened before. This is why Klay Thompson wasn't happy to find out that he didn't make an All-NBA team.
Clearly made the All-NBA team, which would have elevated your potential.
Oh, I did? They already came out?
Yeah, it came out today. You were like right behind Beal. Right behind, who got third team? Kyrie. But you barely, yeah, Kemba. Kemba got it. You were a couple.
I mean, that's cool and all, but like, when you go to 5 straight finals, I respect those guys, but holy, when you go to 5 straight, I mean, it takes more than just a couple of NBA guys.
It significantly impacted how much money he could make. And that's why it's very likely that Kemba Walker will now stay in Charlotte, because now the Hornets can give him a Supermax because he made the All-NBA third team. And that's why Rudy Gobert is eligible for a Supermax because he made the All-NBA third team as well. Now, before we go in depth on the issues with the Supermax, I actually want to talk about Rudy Gobert. I just want to let it be known that I mean no disrespect at all towards Rudy Gobert and his game. I was completely on his side when that stupid ass crying controversy was somehow a controversy. And I acknowledge that Rudy Gobert is the best defensive center in the league and arguably the most impactful defensive player in the NBA. He is a phenomenal player on defense, he is a great rebounder, and he is a solid offensive player, and he certainly deserved his All-NBA selection. However, another aspect of this that needs to be taken into consideration is, as big as the 60 million figure looks, it's really more like what 35 million is today, because in 2027, $60 million will be 35% of the salary cap as opposed to what it is now, which would be half of it. So it's not as crippling as it could appear, but there are probably 5 players in the league that are worth 35% of a team's salary cap. And I don't think it's disrespectful at all to say that Rudy Gobert is worth at most 20% of a team's salary cap. He's a top 20 player, but in no way should he be paid like a top 5 player. No disrespect. I'm going out of my way to say all of this because I do really like Rudy Gobert. And another important thing to mention is that I have no problem with players making money. I'm of the opinion that you should always get what you're worth. If the market deems Rudy Gobert as worth $60 million a year, I have no problem with Gobert getting that money. If you're worth 60 mil, ask for 60 mil. In my case, I'm worth a couple $1,000s a year, but I make damn sure that I collect that much. Taking a pay cut to win more is admirable, but not making that decision is in no way something that a player should be hated for. So with those things out of the way, it's time to talk about why Supermax contracts are really bad for the NBA. And the reason they are bad is because they are completely counterproductive to the goal of the Supermax contract. The goal of the Supermax contract was to prevent super teams from happening and to help small market teams keep their superstars around. Now the first thing I think does work, unless the relationship between the player and team is really bad like Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard, most players will choose that Supermax over going somewhere else to win or brand themselves better. Winning is nice, but not necessarily nice enough to give up $100 million plus. And again, if a player wants to make the decision to chase money over winning, more power to them. And at face value, Supermax contracts actually achieve the second goal, which is to help small market teams keep whatever superstar talent they acquire. But that's only at its face value. In reality, for small markets, the Supermax prevent superstars from leaving larger markets to come to their small market team or any kind of market, and it cripples them financially. The NBA's problem with small markets is something the league has been trying to fix for a long time. So much so that there is a conspiracy that friend of the channel Mojo99 made a great video about, that the NBA draft lottery was rigged for the Pels and Grizz to get the first and second pick. Because the Memphis Grizzlies and New Orleans Pelicans, if you didn't know, are the 2 lowest valued franchises in the league. So they are the smallest markets. So the conspiracy is that the NBA wanted the Pels and Grizz to get Zion and Ja Morant to boost their value. Do I believe that? Not really. I don't think anyone can really look at this year's draft lottery and view that as something that was pre-planned. But I'm betting you that the NBA officials were pretty happy to see those teams get the top 2 picks. So all that is to say that the NBA has had a small market problem for a long time that they have really been trying to fix. The main source of those problems being, well, one, there's the lack of marketability when you're in a small city that doesn't really care about their athletes as much as bigger cities, and 2, nobody wants to live in fucking Minnesota. I'm sorry, Minnesota fans, but nobody wants to live in a state that is 10 feet deep in snow 2/3 of the year. And yes, you can point to Kevin Garnett, and I'm sure there's somebody in the NFL as well, but Kevin Garnett was fucking nuts, and he made sure we all knew that.
I'm not even explain this. You know, people used to call me crazy because I wouldn't get any sleep, but I would sit up and wonder why or what could I have done different. People gonna think you crazy. People ain't gonna understand you. Weird. What's wrong with you?
But really, all he needed to do to let us know that he was insane was say, hey guys, I actively chose to play on a terrible team in fucking Antarctica for a decade. So that's the problem. Superstars drafted to small market teams don't want to stay there, and superstar free agents don't want to leave to go to a smaller market team. The New Orleans Pelicans, even though New Orleans is a great city, does not have the allure of Los Angeles or Chicago or New York. And because they are a smaller market, the money-making opportunities outside of their contracts are very minimal in comparison to Los Angeles. Because of this, we see superstar players leave small market teams all the time. So what's the solution to this? Well, according to the NBA, it is the Supermax. Make it so that these superstar players can re-up with their small market team for way more money than they can with the other 29 teams. And that will keep those players with their teams, and as a result, hopefully keeping their superstar will boost that team's value. In theory, that was a great idea. But one of the many problems with this is these contracts don't just apply to small market teams. I opened this video with clips of players re-signing with their teams and noticed that none of them were small market teams. And no, OKC is middle of the pack, so they aren't considered a small market. That's one problem. Supermaxes keep all stars on all teams, not just small market stars on small market teams. It ruins the already minimal chance that small market teams have at bringing in a superstar from a larger market. There is also a really big flaw in logic with the Supermax. The idea that having a superstar just by default improves your team's profit. Even though the Cleveland Cavaliers have always been in the middle of the pack in terms of value, despite having LeBron James twice, the Pelicans with Anthony Davis has always been towards the bottom of the league in value, despite having one of the 7 best players in the league. And for the last couple of years, the New York Knicks, Chicago Bulls, and LA Lakers pre-LeBron and post-Kobe have all constantly been towards the top 5 of the league in value. The Bulls this year were 4th in value, and the Knicks, the team with the worst record in the NBA, whose 2 best players were Mitchell Robinson and Emmanuel Mudiay, had the #1 highest value in the NBA over the all-star team that is the Golden State Warriors. So superstar talent does not equal more value for a franchise. And finally, these contracts financially cripple teams. I promise you the Utah Jazz paying Rudy Gobert $60 million a year will ruin this team far more than letting him leave in free agency would. But like I said, small market teams are desperate. I would bet a lot of money that the Utah Jazz give Rudy Gobert that contract. Wouldn't bet 60 million, but I would bet a lot, even if it ends up killing them. And Rudy will and should take that money. And it will ultimately end up holding the Utah Jazz back as a franchise. Which means that the NBA Supermax will end up crippling and hurting small market teams more than it does help them. I don't know what the solution to the small market problem in the NBA is, or if there really is one. There's only so much you can do, but what I do know is that the Supermax is not the solution. That is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.